When it's all said and done, Randy Orton is going to be considered one of the upper tiers of any Wrestling Hall of Fame class. He's certified Hall of Fame at this point. He's one of the first names that comes to mind when you say wrestling royalty for a good reason. It's Sportskeeda Wrestling. I'm Kevin. We're getting into Randy Orton's big career. Let us know your favorite Randy Orton memories and matches before we break it all down. Get into the comments below. From a young age, everyone knew the great things that were awaiting him. In a 14 World Championship run, a Grand Slam career later would come. It's safe to say that Randy Orton lived up to his potential, his family name, and so much more. He now has over 20 years under his belt in WWE, but there's been no period of his career remembered more fondly than the time he really shook things up as the Legend Killer. And when you think of how it all came about, it makes total sense, even if he was victimizing some of your favorites. He's a third-generation superstar, the son of WWE Hall of Famer Cowboy Bob Orton Jr., and was groomed by Ric Flair and Triple H in the early stages of his WWE career, and also graduated from Ohio Valley Wrestling, WWE's developmental territory, with other future Hall of Famers. Essentially, he was raised by legends, raised with other future greats, and had all of the elements to become one of the generational performers he would become. It's only fitting that he would be a guy who was all about taking out the previous generation, hence the name Legend Killer. But how did this incredible 4-year run, how did this incarnation of Orton come together? And where did it begin? The date is September 15th, 2003. Believe it or not, the first victim was the fabulous Moolah. It was her 80th birthday, and she defeated Victoria in just 31 seconds in a feel-good, fun moment on Raw. Orton was young, brash, and did not respect anyone when he was running with the Evolution faction. And when he was in the ring and he was singing the praises of Moolah, who he described as a legend, something happened. Right then and there, he introduced himself as Randy Orton, Legend Killer, and hit one of the most vicious and violent RKOs you'll ever remember. That's right, he did this to an 80-year-old woman. He was a little over a year into his WWE run, but there wasn't a moment like this before where fans got to see such unbridled, unfiltered ruthlessness that would define him throughout the rest of his career. This incarnation of Orton would have its first significant challenge in a real sink or swim moment for him when he was put up against Shawn Michaels at just 23 years old. He was in there with the Heartbreak Kid, and boy did he swim, he did not sink. In what was the first of many Legend versus Legend Killer matchups, he defeated Shawn Michaels thanks to the help of Ric Flair. Around the same time, Orton defeated the legendary Sergeant Slaughter on Monday at Raw. He managed to capture the Intercontinental title by the end of the year in that famous moment where all 4 members of Evolution held gold at the same time. And the special guest referee was Mick Foley. This is important because Mick Foley would be the next and maybe the most formative man that Randy Orton would face on this run. At WrestleMania 20, Randy Orton, Batista, and Ric Flair of Evolution faced Mick Foley and this guy you may know by the name of The Rock.
I never had a pretty pony.
You never had a pretty pony?
I didn't play with those. I was like, those are my sisters, okay? That was it.
Yes, The Rock was coming back to be at Foley's side in Madison Square Garden in a 2-on-3 handicap match that Orton won with an RKO on Foley. This was definitive Legend Killer and maybe even definitive Mick Foley. And this was the best of the late stages of Foley's career where he truly went to different emotional depths and would pursue Orton into his match, a hardcore match at Backlash. This might just be one of the best hardcore matches in WWE history, maybe one of the best in Foley's career, because the amount of both vile hatred that both men expressed through violent expression in the ring was purely paced and truly showed off the type of characters they could be through pure, gritty, undisputed war. While it just felt like a foregone conclusion that Randy Orton would come out the winner in this situation, that's not really the biggest part of it. It was the true expression of endurance that Mick Foley was able to go back to, the ability to simply win you over in the face of the oncoming storm of a younger star. Mick Foley is one of the most selfless performers in WWE history, and on a promo 18 years later on Monday Night Raw, Randy Orton said the words, "It's because of Mick Foley that I became the Legend Killer." Weeks later, with a happy feeling in the air on Monday Night Raw, Jerry the King Lawler with a smiling Stacy Keibler acknowledged one of the toughest kings of wrestling legendary fame, 8-time world champion Harley Race at ringside. And once the word legend was uttered, that queued up Orton hitting the ringside area to ruin the whole thing, insulting Harley Race and adding disgusting levels of disrespect, spitting in the face of Harley, literally. If you're wondering why Orton only spit on Race and they didn't get more physical, it was because Harley Race at that point wasn't physically able to get in the ring and do any of that. So it was just left to him simply being, yet again, opportunistically despicable. Bruce Prichard, WWE executive producer, recalled being grossed out by the entire idea of the spitting incident on an episode of his Something to Wrestle With podcast, and said it was actually Harley Race who insisted on it because of the mutual respect between him and Randy Orton. Reportedly, Orton was understandably not crazy about the idea of introducing spit to the entire angle, especially on the face of such a legendary figure that he genuinely respected out of character, but according to Prichard, Harley Race simply said, "No, kid, this is going to get you over." But in a surprising twist, Randy Orton would turn to a fan favorite by becoming the youngest world champion in WWE history at the age of 24. It felt like an abrupt, maybe out-of-touch decision to also have him get pulled out of the Evolution faction and have him be the next big babyface champion. Yeah, we're not feeling it. When he was out there killing legends so frequently and proving to be such a natural heel, the decision to turn him the other direction kind of backfired and led to Batista becoming the biggest beneficiary of the entire Evolution story. We're also not including any kind of out-of-the-ring antics that may have influenced WWE going in a different direction. It was rather why WWE decided to have Randy Orton revert to becoming the Legend Killer once again and start a career-defining feud against The Undertaker right before he turned 25.
Enjoying the ride, Randy?
It's also worth considering in retrospect that many superstars really don't hit their peak until maybe their late 30s or early 40s. Look at Bobby Lashley, for example. It's a bit crazy to see that Orton was given that top-level world title run so early in his career when he was still developing within the WWE system. Keep in mind, this was literally just 3 years into his main roster run that he became a world champion. He came closer than almost anybody before him in breaking The Undertaker's streak at WrestleMania and was presented as the biggest threat to The Undertaker in years. Despite some things that happened out of the ring in preparation for the match, like Orton reportedly being late for a rehearsal that his father was at. Yeah, when you do that with The Undertaker, maybe your reputation starts to catch up with you. It's another example of reality, the real person, whoever they are in that moment, in that frame of time, turning up the volume on that and becoming a great character from it. Orton was a guy who had so much given to him right out of the gate, and here he was being a completely disrespectful, overly confident villain. While the streak itself was acknowledged, this was the first time that WWE really used the streak as a key part of The Undertaker's story heading into WrestleMania. But you know what else has a key part in that story? Him RKOing his then girlfriend Stacy Keibler and then later hitting the RKO on Jake the Snake Roberts when he was warned by the legend about the overconfidence that he had against The Undertaker. So that's another legend on the list. Although Orton failed to end the streak of The Undertaker, the feud with The Undertaker would continue later into that year and the summer. Orton managed to defeat The Undertaker at SummerSlam that year, and then again in a casket match at No Mercy 2005, while teaming up with his father, Bob Orton Jr. This time, it wasn't simply enough to defeat The Undertaker. He wanted to make sure to solidify his truly evil Legend Killer status that was being questioned simply because he couldn't beat him at WrestleMania earlier in the year. So what did Randy Orton do? He set the casket with The Undertaker inside on fire. And with that, probably the 1,000th time that The Undertaker is quote-unquote died. But it's The Undertaker. He doesn't die. I will never forget the look on Randy Orton's face looking into those flames. Orton would come out the better on the other end of the Undertaker feud, and at Survivor Series that year, he would be the sole survivor for Team SmackDown in the Elimination Tag Team match. A fun little fact, he became the sole survivor for the third year in a row, and would arguably go on to become one of the greatest performers in the history of Survivor Series. Yeah, he's done with The Undertaker. Moving on to the next thing. No, gong. Classic Undertaker return at Survivor Series, and he would go on to defeat Randy Orton inside Hell in a Cell at Armageddon, ending their feud, possibly the best of 2005. Going into deep, wild waters with The Undertaker did just as much for Randy Orton as his program with Mick Foley did at Backlash the year before. Now an established main event player, re-dialed into his villainous persona, Orton would actually tone down a bit on the Legend Killer moniker as he went up in a World Championship pursuit.
Ain't heaven. Eddie's down there in hell.
He lost again at WrestleMania 22 against Rey Mysterio, who would be coronated, and soon faced a 60-day suspension for violating the WWE wellness policy. Yeah, now that out-of-the-ring stuff was creeping up again. Let's just say that he wasn't the most popular guy backstage around this time, nor did he have the reputation of being easy to deal with, but still people knew he was one of the top performers in the company. But WWE was still determined to push him on the big screen throughout all of these problems. He brought back the Legend Killer moniker in a feud with the greatest legend maybe in WWE history, the guy who helped put the company on the international map, Hulk Hogan, where he RKO'd the Hulkster onto the back of a car. It led to a big clash at SummerSlam, one of the very rare matches for Hulk Hogan around this time with Orton. Him in once again a prime featured position, and for reasons unknown to anybody, Hulk Hogan walked out victorious. The legend ain't being killed, brother. Oh, and that was the last match Hulk Hogan ever wrestled in WWE. Yet another notch on Randy Orton's belt. Orton stayed at the forefront of WWE television, teaming up with another disruptive superstar in Edge to feud with DX, but the focus was more on their run as tag team champions, and he repeatedly failed in his chances at the WWE Championship in 2007. When they split a little after WrestleMania 23, Orton once again reverted to being the Legend Killer and defeated Ric Flair on Monday Night Raw, then Shawn Michaels again on pay-per-view, this time at Judgment Day, two absolutely underrated classics of the time. The victory itself was controversial because it was technically a knockout when HBK collapsed. Orton, pursuing yet another trophy for his case of names that he's taken down, would then face the returning Dusty Rhodes, a Great American Bash, an event that he actually created, in a match he was famous for, a Texas bull rope match, putting away the American Dream in what would be the Dream's last match for the WWE. See what we're saying here? He's literally ending careers in WWE. It was noticed around this time that Randy Orton had a snake-like movement in the ring, and some of that persona aesthetically worked its way into his presentation, and his next major character reinvention, or just renaming, was the Viper. That's right, he's the Snake Man of the WWE. As Randy Orton went on to become an established multi-time world champion, he was quickly reaching veteran status, and that was seen most notably when he started the Legacy faction. Yes, a group made up of second-generation superstars that initially had members of the Anawahi family and Slim Snuka. The group was actually made up mostly of Orton, Cody Rhodes, and Ted DiBiase, and the focus shifted away from them actively destroying legends. This didn't stop him from doing that, though, to Vince McMahon in 2009. But by that point, his Legend Killer run had truly come to an end. Orton would spend the next decade truly defining his legacy, headlining WrestleMania a couple of times, becoming an all-time great. This isn't to say that it was all flowers and roses, because at one point he lost a lot of the momentum that he had while he was the Legend Killer. It was only in 2020 when WWE attempted to revive the whole Legend Killer persona, with Randy Orton coming off of his ruthless victory over Edge in the greatest wrestling match ever at Backlash. It was also brought back to return the infamous punt to the head, a move that Vince McMahon reportedly banned for years before Orton convinced him to reintroduce it safely. Orton would go on to assault a flurry of legends, including Christian, Michaels, The Big Show, Ric Flair, before winning his 14th world title from Drew McIntyre in the unfortunate no-fans era of WWE in the pandemic. But overall, the Legend Killer run was really only 4 to 5 years, and even that's a stretch considering the number of times WWE dropped that and then brought it back in between. The Legend Killer run made Randy Orton into who he is today, and since he's now a 2-decade veteran of the wrestling business in the biggest company in the world, it seems like he's far too deep into being a legend himself to become a Legend Killer again. It was a Hall of Fame worthy run in and of itself, and when you factor in that he was 23 to 27 during most of it, and that titles and other accolades came along, but really the reactions he earned along the way were some of the biggest things that were a part of it, that's the stuff you remember about Randy Orton. Now just imagine if there was another Legend Killer on the horizon who wanted to take out Randy Orton himself. You can never say never.